halting manner. And as I was going out the door, Srila Prabhupada had his hand on the door frame, and I distinctly remember he had a tear coming out of his eyes, and he said, "Please come back." Just like that. And, well, I did come back, but I didn't come back the way he wanted me to, right at that moment. I walked out, and I almost got killed by some thugs right around the corner. Almost an instant reaction.
I remember his face. I don't remember his body. It's interesting. I remember his face. We did get these wonderful close-ups of his face. That's where his power, his focus, and his calm presence were all gathered in his face. But here, it was the beginning for us, for meeting many spiritual masters. And it was also the beginning of the Hare Krishna movement. And it was also the beginning of a trend that grew towards the appreciation of Eastern religions in America.
You know, we had a big tape recorder that weighed 50 pounds. I was in charge of that. Brahmananda would bring it down from Prabhupada's closet every night. So my job was to set up the tape for Prabhupada's lecture. I mean, Prabhupada was very insistent in having his lectures tape recorded. I mean, so much so that when the tape ran out, he would stop and wait for me to rethread the tape with a new one. In those days, we didn't have money, and those tapes were, I remember they were like $3, $4 for Scotch tapes. So Prabhupada wanted everything tape recorded. We didn't think it was important in those days. But now we do. They're important for preaching.
As usual, I just breezed into Srila Prabhupada's apartment, and I said, "Swamiji, I'd like to do something to help," as if I were God's gift to the world or to his mission. But immediately, it's almost as if that's what he was waiting for. And immediately, Srila Prabhupada picked up this huge tray of prasadam and handed me this whole tray of prasadam and said, "You could be the one who distributes the prasadam to the devotees." Those were his exact words. So I was, okay, I had not only a service, but a whole position now, that I was the prasadam distributor. But unfortunately, I was so spaced out that I was standing on the top of the stairs outside of Prabhupada's apartment to go down to the store.
Die just by an atom of that. So similarly, the soul is so tiny, but it gives all life to the body. We just didn't know what to call it. It's arti, but we just called it bells in those days. Prabhupada is doing, or Swamiji is doing bells. Later on, we learned about the genuine process of arti.
Srila Prabhupada was lecturing on the Chaitanya Charitamrita at 22nd Avenue. He was talking about Krishna and the cowherd boys. It was very juicy. He was just talking about their pastimes and their playing in the forest, and it was so wonderful to hear him talking about that. But and then he would talk about how the cowherd boys were thinking, and he said that they were always thinking about Krishna. They were always thinking Krishna, 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 Krishna. And he just kept going on and just Krishna, just repeating it. Krishna, 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 Krishna. I guess people would say he went into a trance. He was just saying Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Now I remember particularly Brahmananda, who was sitting at Prabhupada's feet right next to him and looking up at Prabhupada. And Brahmananda started trembling. And then he let out a gasp. He just went, "Oh!" like that. And I don't know if Prabhupada stopped when he heard that or not, but it was an extraordinary moment. Srila Prabhupada was just, he was there. He was with the cowherd boys, thinking nothing but Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. But we used to say it was I suppose, innocent of us. But anyway, we used to say that Prabhupada had Krishna painted on the inside of his eyelids. So whenever he closed his eyes, he would see Krishna. It was simple-minded, but it showed something of our appreciation for him.
Prabhupada is sitting with there's a cushion from a sofa. I picked that up off the street. Someone had thrown out an old sofa. I picked up the cushion and brought it. And Prabhupada used it. There was no money, no books. I mean, there was no income. Prabhupada would pass the basket at the end of the kirtan and collect maybe $3. People would put coins in, quarters. Prabhupada's first instruction to me was to do my job. I was a teacher for New York City Board of Education, and he said, give your salary to Krishna. You know, I thought I would give up my job. Prabhupada said, no, you do your job. And I asked Prabhupada, well, how do I give my salary to Krishna? Prabhupada said, well, you give it to me, and I'll give it to Krishna. I said, okay. And that's how we were running on. But we had no money. We were using as a sabji in the summertime. Prabhupada started in the summer. It was May 66 at 26 2nd Avenue. We would get watermelon, because watermelon was so cheap, 10 cents a pound. And then we'd eat the watermelon and then take the rind and cook that as a sabji. That was one of the best, the big sabjis, the watermelon rinds.
When Srila Prabhupada first settled into the 26 Second Avenue to see his disciples doing that, at that time, the only record, the LP, that had come out was the Krishna Consciousness LP. Well, we would play that, Srila Prabhupada speaking, and his singing of the Sangsara prayers, and also the kirtan on the other side. We would play them in the apartments, but with the speakers right up in the windows going out onto the street, so that the sound of the kirtan was blaring out up and down the block, so everybody could hear it. So we weren't at all shy in those days about presenting Krishna consciousness to the masses. But many people became introduced to Krishna consciousness, or at least the chanting of the Maha Mantra, through those speakers, because people all up and down the streets, when they saw us walking up and down, they would go, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And that's how they got to know us.
This is Brahmananda, who's Gargamuni's brother, and Prabhupada made him the first temple president and his brother the first temple treasurer. That's me getting up to dance now. And Prabhupada had them pose for my first Lord Nrsingadev painting. He had one of them be Hiranyakashipu, the big demon, and the other be Lord Nrsingadev, and he put one on the other one's lap, and he showed them how they should pose for Lord Nrsingadev to rip apart the demon Hiranyakashipu. And Prabhupada also posed for the painting, making his eyes crossed and showing himself ripping the demon with his hands and showing long nails. And this painting on the window of Matchless Gifts is from a copy of a print that Prabhupada gave me of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan party. His performing Sankirtan at the courtyard of the house of Srivas Thakur. And Prabhupada pointed out who the different personalities in the painting are. That's Mukunda and his sons, that's Haridas Thakur, and who the Panchatattva members are. So, and that was my very first painting that I did for Prabhupada. And it was so bad, everything was out of proportion. The feet were gigantic and the heads were small, and the hand was coming out someplace that wasn't connected to the body. But Prabhupada was so encouraging that when he saw the painting, all the devotees would always gather around him. So he said to everybody, Krishna has sent, like Krishna sent me to paint, even though it was so bad. He was so encouraging. And on that day, he also invited me to come and paint up in his quarters. So for the next months, I was painting there. And he would often come in to